Hey, what's up? All right, so look, today, um, I want to move further into dimensions. Okay, we talked about dimensions earlier in the beginner series, and basically how to draw some default dimension types and whatnot, and we went through all of them. But there are other functions that you can do with dimensions, not just the types of dimensions, but also the settings of the dimensions and maybe a couple modifiers for those dimensions. I may not go through all of them, mainly because I don't use all of them. Things like the tolerance dimension setup or style or whatever. The it's like just for making tolerances. I don't do that kind of stuff. I don't use markers, but anything I don't go over, you go to the help file or read the tooltips and see what they do exactly. So I'm gonna start with paper space, dimension, and dimension styles first, and then come back to model space. um, because actually, you know what? I'll create a dimension style for each. We'll do that. So let's start with the basics. Let's do a linear dimension, and that'll cover a lot of what we want to do right off the bat. A majority, I'd say like 90% of your dimensions or more, are going to be linear dimensions. So let's put a string of dimensions here. And they look kind of funny right now because they are so tiny. Okay? Like the text is tiny. And the text is tiny because of the dimension style. It's kind of set up for paper space. Now remember that paper space works on a much smaller scale because it's meant for paper. The dimension or the distance of this wall is 20 feet, right? But my paper is only, right now set to 8.5 by 11 inches. So you need a viewport to scale that down. So the dimension graphically looks fine here in paper space because everything's at a smaller scale with 8.5 by 11 paper. But over here where it's 20 feet, it's really tiny. Okay, really hard to see. So we're going to adjust the properties of the dimension style. So we're going to open up the dimension style by typing in D. And we have, I'm not going to get into annotated dimensions. I'm just going to stick with standard dimensions. And we're going to make two styles. Okay, I'm going to make a brand new one. And it's going to be called model. Or, yeah, model. Like model for model space. And we'll start with standard as a base point to make this style. Use it for all dimensions. You can choose if you want to use this for a certain type. We're going to use it for all dimensions, and we're not going to make it annotative. Hit continue. And it brings up the like the new style editor. We can start making our changes here, or you can leave it alone and just hit OK. If you hit OK, it creates the style. And we can always go back into that and modify things as needed. So since we're in model space, I'm going to go ahead and start modifying things I need to. We've got different tabs here. The lines tab will control elements of the dimension, such as the dimension line and the extension lines, things that relate to those, that not the arrowheads, but mainly it's the extension line and dimension lines. And then we have our symbols, which is like our arrow styles for the first and second dimension line, the leader arrow style, the arrow size, center marks, dimension breaks, arc length if you need arc length, or dimension jogs. Those things are in this tab. You've got your text, which controls everything text from the alignment to the placement, justification, the size, the color, things like that. Then we go to fit. Fit is when you place the dimension, how things are laid out. Like here's your fit options. For when there's not enough room to fit everything inside, like if you have a small dimension, where your text is placed by default when you place it, your scaling, and then there's some fine tuning here. Then you got your primary units. This controls the scaling and such and display of the actual text, the actual length in your dimensions, and all the stuff associated with that. And then you have your alternate units. This might be for like if you're drawing something in both imperial and metric, you can set like alternate units and choose what type of unit you want to show. Like if you want it to be a different format. So you can have like, oh, this is architectural inches, but the alternate unit, which will be like in a bracket next to it, will be like in millimeters or something like that. And then again, you have tolerances, which honestly I don't get into. That's more like a manufacturing thing, I feel like, and parts and assemblies and things like that. So I'm not going to. I've never used tolerances, so unfortunately, I'm not going to get into something. I could probably easily figure this out, but I'm just not in this video, so I'm not going to go over something that I don't have experience with. But you know, F1, we'll go over all of the options in the tolerance menu. So it's super easy to do. Well, you can go through and find it. I don't feel like finding it right now. You can go through all that. So, all right. So let's go through each one of these tabs. And it looks like I'm actually going to break this video up because I'm going to try to make these smaller, more palatable videos. So in this one, I'm going to go over each one of the tabs and what they do maybe in separate videos so it's easier to follow along. This is kind of the introduction to dimensions and dimension styles, because I'm going to do one for, like, I'm going to explain everything here, make one for model space, which I just did, and make another one for paper space, and explain paper, like viewport scaling on dimensions, because those kind of things matter. So you kind of have a bird's eye view of what each one of these things are. And when you make a modification, like let's say I want to change the scaling of my dimensions, I can change the overall scaling of everything to, like, I don't know, 48, and say okay, and hit close. And these actually, I should have put these on model. You can change them after the fact, and that made them like way too big. So I can always go back and tweak that dimension style and put maybe something like 24, half the size, and it looks better now. I also have not tolerances. I have did I put tolerances on? I put alternate units on. I don't want that. So I'll get to this in a minute, but like I said, anytime you make changes here, it'll update all the dimensions on that style. Okay, and anytime it uses, there's also manual property overrides. So if you select a dimension and you come over here and you make changes over here, you can override that. So like we did the overall scale right of 12. Say I set the overall scale of this one to 16, and I select this one and I go change this to an overall, and I go to my dimension style. I say modify, and I change this overall scale to 24. This one did not update. These two did, but this one did not. And this one did not update because I did a manual override. So keep that in mind down the line. For anything, if you select a dimension and you change the property in here and then go modify the property in the dimension style, the one you modified manually will not update because you overrode that. So just kind of keep that stuff in mind. Okay. Beyond that, I also want to go over stuff that's in the what do you call it? In the dimension toolbar, which you would also find stuff like in the dimension menu. So I'll go over these briefly. We did linear dimension. We may or may not have done an aligned dimension. I don't remember if we did or not, but an aligned dimension, simply you pick the points of an angle and you put it at it kind of shows you on an angled line what the linear dimension is at that angle. Because if I use a straight linear dimension, it's going to give me the literal X and Y, but it won't give me the real length of that line. It's giving me what's called the delta X or the delta Y. So angular dimension is for that. Or it's an aligned dimension, I'm sorry. You also, I think we did arc dimension already. Ordinate dimension just shows your location in the coordinate space. So if I do an ID on this one, it says 1 foot 9 and 11 inches. If I put my ordinate dimension, it's going to show me either the y-axis dimension, which is really 11.0248 because that's my precision. What's my precision set to? 1/16. So I'll set this to architectural since I'm drawing an architectural. And I'm going to set my precision to 1/16. And let's see what it says now. It should match that 1 foot 9 and 11. So this is 11. And I can turn my ortho 1 to just leave it straight. Or 1 foot 9. Ordinate shows either in an X or a Y. It'll show the coordinate of whatever point you pick. You've also got radius and dimension, which I showed both of those. This is a radius with a jogged dimension. So like if you can't fit the entire thing for whatever reason, um, you can do an angular dimension, which I think I might have done that one. You pick two lines, and it shows the relative angle between them. If I were to have this set to like here, you can see the distance or the angle between those two. So good for showing angles. You can set the precision for that later on. We've also got quick dimension. That's like for just picking a line. And usually you can just pick one side if it's a polyline, but picking a line and it'll just draw that dimension rather than picking 2 points. You're just picking an object. Like, again, I'll pick one object here and it lets me create that line. Okay. You've got baseline dimensions. This is like if you were to pick a dimension, like so instead of doing these dimensions, you would do something like picking a baseline dimension for this one and then going to like here and then doing another one that's like here. And it's a continuous running dimension. And every time you put a new one, it stacks it and puts a new dimension above it equally spaced. And you can control the baseline spacing of this. They use this a lot in like assembly drawings where you have like a work point and you want to show all distances from that work point. You've also got, let's see, dim continue. The way continue works is if by default, it will try to go off your last dimension. So if I do a linear dimension, and then do a dim continue, it will automatically pick up where that one left off. And all I can do is just keep clicking, and it'll keep doing new dimensions. It's really handy. It's like if I come here and erase, I got rid of my last dimension. And so what you'll have to do now is manually select which side of these you want. So I'm going to click this side, and then I can keep doing my dimensions from here, or click the other side and go that way. So dim continue is super handy for doing strings and dimensions like that. Also, if you were to remove one of these extension lines, or have a certain property, dim continue will follow whatever property you're copying from. So if this has overrides on it, your continued dimension will have those same overrides. Like if you turn off a dimension line or extension line, change your scaling, your dim continue will match that. All right. Let's see. What do we got here? This is like you can set dimensions to be aligned. It takes a little bit of work. I've used this before and it's kind of finicky, but let's say I have a linear dimension like this and I want to match them. You can click this and click both dimensions and have it like auto. You can do like an auto spacing or it's attempting to like space them apart. So like I say, if I had like the baseline dimensions like we did earlier. So say we have a string of dimensions that does like, let me see here. So we've got this, and then we've got like maybe an overall, but it looks like too high. You can get it kind of like closer and in line, and it'll do like that. Or select all of them. Maybe you want to just select all of them. There. I think it's whatever one you select first, the other one gets matched to. So like, if I select this first, then this one gets, where'd it go? This first, come on, select, sir. Then it says select dimension to space. It moves that one. But if I were to do it then reverse and select this one first, oops, it brings the 20 down. So it's good for like spacing your dimensions, and then I believe it spaces from here to here, like whatever this dimension is. So like, say I want my dimension to be, in this case, 12 inches apart. I'll click this, and then this one, and then enter, and then enter value of 12. And so if I do a distance command from here to here, we've got 1 foot spacing. And this is great for like having, let's try a few more like layers. Like, let's say you've got, I don't know, here, let's do like one that's just like from here to the midpoint, and then from like the midpoint to here, and then same thing here to here, and then from like here to here. Right? That's good enough. All right. and they'll put this at some weird spacing like that, right? And I want them to be all lined up. Let's say we want to drag everything up to the 20. So I'm going to click the 20. Sorry. Click the 20 first, and then select everything else. And I'm going to put my spacing at 12. And now they're evenly lined up. Very, very cleanly. And if you work in any kind of AEC industry, architectural engineering, construction, a lot of times you'll have designers and checkers that are very particular about having equal spacing on dimensions so that it looks nice and neat and concise. This is just drawing accuracy and making things look very, very presentable. So really, really handy command. All right, you also have dimension breaks. This is like when picking a, I'm going to erase everything here. You can break a portion. I don't want to do that. You can break a, put that, there we go. What the hell? Come on. Portion of the dimension by hitting the break line or the dimension break. And you can pick like an extension line. You can pick 2 points. And you can say like manual. You can pick 2 points and it'll break that. Or here, do manual, break 2 points. If you happen to have a line running through it, you can do auto. It'll break automatically, and there is a setting to control the size of this break. I believe right now it's set to, well, actually I don't know what the default is on this one. I've scaled everything up. I think the default is 1/8 of an inch, but I scaled everything up for my dimension style. So then you got your tolerance, which I said I don't do center marks. I don't do dimension inspections, but I do use the dimensional jog, which you can select a dimension. And then you can put, you specify a location of where you want to put it. A lot of times you'll see it on the dimension line itself. And what that's for is for like, if you have like something that's broken up, like let's say I have a wall, okay, and I do another wall. Is my snap tracking turned on? No. Actually, I should just copy this. Okay, right, and I got like this, and let's say that there is a break here. I'm going to explode these, erase this, and my break line, no, I don't want to, I don't want to draw one. I thought I had Express with break lines. I probably don't have an alias set up for it, that's why. There we go. So I'm going to set my break line size for 2 and an extension line for 1, and let's see if how that works. Break line is part of the Express Tools command, and that's not at all what I wanted. Break line size. Oh, because break line is modified by my dimensional scaling. I'm going to put this on standard, because standard has regular scaling. There. The reason it came out big before is because model has been scaled up by 12. Remember we did that earlier? All right, so I'm going to copy this break line. This is like saying, you know, technically, not distance, technically the dimension of these two things is, put this back on model now, 10 foot and 3/4, because that's what it actually measures out to be. But what I want to say is that I want to override this by editing it, deleting the text and saying, oh, this is really 20 feet long. Okay. But I need to show that it's not truly 20 feet. I don't want somebody coming in here and trying to scale this with an engineering scale and measuring this out to be 20 feet. That's not true. So we put a break line to say that this is 20 feet, but it's broken up. It's not truly 20 feet. The dimension indicates that it's not exactly 20 feet. We're breaking it up. So that's what the dimensional jog is for. Past that, I really don't have to do much after that. Dimension edit is just editing, type of dimension editing. Honestly, I don't use this stuff. If I got to edit a dimension, it's going to be in the properties menu, or it's going to be like through the editor like this. There's not really much else you need to do. There you go. I hate how sometimes these random boxes come up. And then you can quickly switch between styles in the dimensional toolbar. If you're using the ribbon, you can probably swap. I know you can swap from there as well. And the last one will open up your dimensional styles. So this video was a lot longer than I expected it to be, but I'm trying to quickly go through all the dimensional icons here, and then get into and explain each one of them. I'm literally going through these commands really fast, believe it or not. I'm not spending a lot of time on each one of these commands, but they take a little bit of, like, I'm assuming you know nothing about dimensions, nothing about drafting. Maybe you know about drafting, but I'm assuming you don't. So I'm giving an explanation of why you might use some of these dimensions in certain scenarios. So there you have it. In the next few videos, I'll go over the remainder of like the dimensional styles and how to modify dimensions and all that.